So here we have the iTunes program. You know, it looks just like a regular music player, digital music player. But you also have the music store. You can go into the music store, and that will take you to the iTunes music store where you can purchase music online. But they also have, if you look over here on the left-hand column, there's a section devoted solely to podcasts. If I click on that, then that will take me to the podcast section of the music store. There we go. There it is. All right. So this is the podcast section of the iTunes music store. You have mainstream media have actually got into podcasting. Bill Maher has his own podcast. There's a Purina pet casting podcast if you want to get into it. Nickelodeon has a Nickelodeon podcast. No, these are all free. Yes, they're all free to download. iTunes Music Store has over 35,000 podcasts listed in the iTunes Music Store. They have these featured podcasts that they put on the front page of the music store. You can also browse through the podcasts here on the right-hand column. They have them separated into various categories: arts and entertainment, audio blogs, food, health, music, of course, education. But trying to find your a podcast with your interests in mind out of 35,000 is probably something very difficult, or very at least time-consuming, to say the least. But they do have a podcast search engine here. So you could, if let's say you're looking for a podcast on, I don't know, let's look for any podcasts that are on piano pedagogy, for example. Whoa, wow, oh my God, there's a piano podcast on piano pedagogy. Can you believe that? Only one. It's very lonely on the iTunes Music Store, by the way.
What is it?
It's MarioCast, the piano podcast. Never heard of it before? If I click on that, that takes me to the listing of the podcast on the iTunes Music Store. And there is the podcast artwork on the left-hand side. I have 16 episodes of it. It's in the category of higher education, although higher is very debatable. And we have the podcast description on the right-hand side. And over here on the bottom, just like on the iTunes Music Store for music, you also have episodes of the podcast here. And let me show you one of them here. Let's go to O Tannenbaum here. This one was released on, I released this on November 28th, 2005. You can find information about this podcast by clicking on the I information button. This rendition of the Christmas traditional song O Tannenbaum or O Christmas Tree was recorded on November 28, 2005 with a MIDI keyboard using GarageBand and virtual grand piano software plugin by Art Vista. This past year, I did a software review for American Music Teacher on this Art Vista grand piano software, and part of my review was that I said, wow, these sounds on the grand piano, virtual grand piano software are very realistic, and but when you read that in print, how realistic can it be? I mean, my definition of what realistic might be totally different from your idea of what a realistic piano sounds like. So what I did was I podcasted a sample so then I could inform fellow music teachers, particularly piano teachers, what the sounds sound like, and I'd like to play that for you. I also selected to play O Tannenbaum since it was close to Christmas time. So you can preview each podcast by just double-clicking it or clicking play, and it will just do like a 1-minute excerpt of what the podcast is, so you can decide, do I want to download this or not? So let me double-click that, and it will... You're listening to the MarioCast recorded on Monday, November 28, 2005. This is O Tannenbaum, or O Christmas Tree, arranged by Vince Guaraldi. Does that sound like a real piano to you? Okay, so that just is giving you a little preview of it. If you want to listen to the whole episode, you just click on this free Get Episode. You click on it, it will start downloading it to your iTunes music library. You see the progress bar here, and it will add it to your podcast section in your library. We don't need to sit through the rest of the download of that though. Okay. And you can also, probably what's even better about podcasting is that you can subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the free subscribe button. What happens when you click on the subscribe button, you get all the new episodes that I publish downloaded to your computer automatically as I publish them. Right? It's just automatic. You don't have to go to my website and then click here and do that. Now, once you click on the subscribe button, anytime I put any new content on my podcast, it will be delivered to you automatically. There's even a website link. iTunes provides a website link. If I click on this website link, that will take me to my website. Actually, in this particular case, it takes me to my blog, which is located at marioharrell.blogspot.com. And this is where all the real content of my podcast is created, or at least where I put in all the links and all the information dealing with the podcast. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Does it actually download to your computer? Does it send you an email for you to...
No, it actually, as long as you have iTunes or whatever podcatching software open that you're subscribed to that RSS feed that I mentioned earlier, it will download it automatically. Yeah. So, no work involved there. And you also see on my right-hand side, I have various buttons where you can subscribe through via iTunes. On my blog, I have a listing for my iTunes Music Store listing. Yahoo Podcasts also syndicates my podcast as well at this particular address. I didn't create any of this web page. All I did was submit my RSS feed address to them, and they just put all this stuff on it, where I can actually, where I can actually watch, download, or listen to various episodes of the podcast. I don't have to do any of this stuff. The RSS feed just does it for me automatically. Yes, Ron?
So Yahoo, you can't download it to your iPhone?
No, well, actually, I should correct myself, because on Yahoo, if you click download, it will actually download that. And if you do have iTunes installed, it will actually send it to your iTunes Music Library. So you do need iTunes and Yahoo Podcasts if you want to do it that way. Okay. Going back to my page also, Podcast Pickle is, podcastpickle.com is a community of podcasters who have gotten together and listed their podcasts on this particular directory. They also syndicate my podcast as well. So yes, what if you want to create your own podcast? There's a podcasting workflow. There's 3 main steps in making a podcast available to the public. You have to create your content. You need a microphone and basically a computer. This is Scott Merritt from Vanderbilt University. He has a podcast on on what they're doing in the science department at Vanderbilt University. He actually played some of my music on his podcast. You also distribute those sound files that you create to a server. And the RSS feed should direct consumers to this sound file on the server. I use a combination of free services like Blogger, FeedBurner to create all the necessary podcast enclosures in my feed, and I store all my files on archive.org, which is a website that holds various files that people put their artistic creations up that they don't give up their copyrights to, but it's under what we call a Creative Commons license that it's free to be distributed out to anyone, just as long as we're attributed with credit for creating the particular piece of artwork or whatever creation, that being the podcast.
Is there a charge for that?
No, I was very surprised. The only charge that I would say there is that it tends to be very slow, but up until about a week ago, I was pretty much unemployed, so that was my best bet there. But I'll probably move on to something that is, I actually list on my handout. Liberated Syndication is probably one of the less expensive hosts of podcasts, and they charge things just like $5 a month, I believe, is one option that they charge. And of course, consumers have to access the podcast, and they get the sound file served to their personal computer automatically by being subscribed to the podcast feed. And then, of course, they can transfer the sound file to a portable digital music player if they so desire.
You said that was archive.org?
Yes, I actually use ourmedia.org, but they have a partnership with archive.org.
Wait, is it our media?
Yes, it's on my handout.
Okay.
How can podcasts enhance your teaching? Well, you can deliver audio content to students to develop listening skills. If you can imagine maybe giving like, oral skills drills, dictation over podcasts, and then students can email you their responses. You can imagine how kids' listening skills could actually improve. You can share student performances with family and friends from around the world. Sometimes not all family members can make it to the spring recital, but they can catch it on a podcast later if they so desire. Recorded content from lessons or classes can be reviewed multiple times. Since it is downloaded to your computer or onto your iPod, you can go back and, oh, I think I didn't really get that first concept, and you can review it multiple times. So that allows students to digest informational or educational podcasts at their own pace. Also, I think there's documented proof that podcasting can actually motivate students. When students know that their performances are podcast to a wider global audience, because it is out there for anyone in the world to listen to or obtain, it creates a meaningful learning context and motivates them to do their best. This is Jean Halderson, who incorporated podcasting projects into her classes at Longfellow Middle School in Wisconsin. And they had these following, some of her students had these particular comments about podcasting. Alyssa said, "Podcasting reaches out to others across the nation. I feel our voices are being heard." So if students can get this self-motivated on podcasting about subjects such as history, math, science, imagine how motivated your students would be if they knew they were going to be podcast out there for all the world to see, and they would be motivated to do their best. And it is actually being done as we speak here. I don't have time to go over it today, but Cranbrook Composers Podcast is a middle school podcast. The middle school music teacher has their students create music compositions through various digital media, and they podcast them. They have interviews with the students, like they're on their own radio show, like they're big stars and everything. So it's really neat. Excuse me. What are limitations to educational podcasts? Well, audio podcasts can lack essential elements for more visual learners. Those of you who came in early listening to that guy, Dwayne from playpiano.com, talking about major chords and how they're related to major scale. Yes, he had all the playing stuff, but lacking sometimes the visual elements can sometimes throw people off, particularly if you have a different learning style. And I'll demonstrate what an enhanced audio podcast is in just a minute when we get to podcasting software. It is a kind of a one-way type of interaction, at least when it's actually first consumed. There's no immediate interaction between the instructor or podcaster and the student and listener, but most podcasts, such as mine, have a website or blog where students can provide feedback, post up comments, and incite discussions about the podcast. So then there is this kind of time delay type of interaction that there can be between the listener and the podcaster. And of course, it's not intended to replace traditional teaching methods, but rather just to supplement it or enhance it.